now. It's my time. It's my time. Last chance to get these things roll like blind. Don't let it sail out, it'll stop my grind.
I am shaking my head. I am truly shaking my head. How are you today? I hope this, the second day of the new year, January the 2nd, is going well for you. I am here to talk about the many, many subgenres of romance. Did you know that there are so many subcategories in romance in which to write about? Because everyone, all romance readers, don't like the same type of stories. So here is an incomplete list of the subcategories of romance. Number one, the most popular, as you have seen from my video, is contemporary romances. And contemporary romances are those romances that are set in a time period after the 1970s. These are modern stories with a modern tale, and they reflect what is currently going on in today's society. Some of the storylines may feature hypergamy, which is marrying up, or hypogamy, which is marrying down. You may even read about working moms and stay-at-home dads. Another subcategory of romance is, you guessed it, young adult romances. You may be surprised to find out that YA romances are read by teenagers as well as adults. People into their 30s and 40s and 50s are reading YA. And why? Because it reconnects you with your youth, with that time in your life when everything was uncertain, when love was not defined, when you had to figure out what it is to be a young adult or to be a teenager, and to deal with all the trials and tribulations of being a teenager. They are usually coming-of-age stories, and as I said, they are very, very popular. My first novel, my most popular novel to date, is called Naira, and it is a coming-of-age story that is set in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and it deals with one teenage girl and her decision on whether or not to become intimate with her boyfriend. Ooh, and now we come to the really juicy, juicy subgenre of romance, erotic romance. This is a very, very popular subcategory of romance. And whether you believe it or not, it is not all about the sex. These stories talk about intimacy, yes, but they are also part of a plot. So the intimate relationships that these two characters have, or multiple characters have, are not independent of the storyline. Everything works together. The romance, the sexual tension, the exploration of sexuality, all of this can be found in a good, juicy, erotic romance. I, yes, have written multiple erotic romances, and I've enjoyed writing every love scene. So you're going to have to check out my catalog. I have The Temporary Mistress. I also have His Winter Wonderland. And let's not forget Cargo or Intangible Assets. If you are nervous about writing erotica, then you can take small steps, baby steps. Write a novella, write a short story, test the waters, see if this is something that you like, and if it is, then write as much as you want, and don't be afraid to take chances. And next on our list is historical romances. These are stories, love stories, that take place in the past, in the far, far past, or in a more recent past. You may find lots of historical romances that are set in England, and they could be the Regency era or they could be the Victorian era. However, I would like to add to this. There are stories that can be set in the 1960s, 1950s. They can be set in the United States. They can be stories that feature African American characters or people of color here in the States and also abroad. You, as a writer, can create your own subgenre of historical romances. And that way, they can be, the historical romances, very inclusive. And you, with your pen and paper or laptop or word processor, if you're old school like me, whatever your method of writing, you can craft stories that are individual and unique and speak to time periods that may not be addressed. But if you decide to tackle this type of romance, do your research. When you write romantic comedy, you must keep in mind that you are telling a love story through the lens of humor. And these stories can be heartwarming, funny, quirky. It is all up to you. And obviously, as a writer, some of your humor will find its way into these stories. These comedic romance stories can feature tropes. For example, mistaken identity or amnesia, forgetting who you are and where you are. You can have so much fun in writing romantic comedy. And if I may suggest, don't try to force the humor. Let it come naturally. Relax in your writing. Find quirky things that you find amusing and see if they will translate into part of your story. For those of you out there who love paranormal romances, I have a question for you. Who is your favorite author? For me, I love reading L.A. Banks. Her vampire series is phenomenal. Paranormal romances feature ghosts, angels, pixies, vampires, and werewolves. Oh my! And let me tell you, when I sit down and read about my favorite type of character, which are vampires, I immediately swoon and fall in love. And yes, I'm afraid. I am petrified of this mysterious dark creature. But I love reading about vampires. They are my favorite supernatural creature. But let me say, when writing about these otherworldly creatures, do your research. Make sure you create a world that is believable and that your characters can function in, because we don't want to be taken out of the story once we get invested. When I think of religious romances, I immediately think of the Amish community or Christians. However, there are so many religions in the world, and you can choose a religion and write about it. And I think what would be very interesting is if you choose a religion that we don't know about or that we don't see often. And obviously, you don't want to preach in your stories. You want to let your characters convey their faith, convey their beliefs and their religion. And also, these stories usually are all about the emotional side of love. So you don't get a lot of physicality in these stories. But I have read Christian romances and Amish romances where I didn't even realize that there was no physical touching other than maybe a chaste kiss, an intimate glance. But there is so much that you can do when writing in this genre. And you can challenge your creativity and you can challenge your own sensibilities, because you can convey love through sweetness, through non-touching. There's so much that you can do in this genre. When I think of goth romances, I usually think dark, and I think wicked, and I think tortured hero and heroine. These stories can take place in the modern time or they can take place in the past, but they are a great read.